the book club for movies. It is Amy and Samir here. We are live streaming on Facebook and YouTube. This is only our second day of streaming on YouTube, but thank you all for joining us if you are a new viewer. Again, we've been doing this for quite a while now, but we are new to just streaming on YouTube. But thank you guys for being here. Samir, happy Tuesday. How's Tuesday going?
Happy Tuesday. Hi, Crystal.
Hello, Crystal. Crystal's one of our, I don't know if people can see all the comments on here, so I think I really need to get better at
post them a little more. And there's Andres.
Andres, two of our favorites, two of our regulars. And hopefully we'll get some more regulars. Not that we have people that we do have, but we just want more.
So yesterday we watched The Matrix for a Man Crush Monday.
We did with Keanu
Reeves.
He's just a very handsome man. Hello, Bonnie from Down Under. I don't know what that accent was. I'm sorry, Bonnie.
It was a good attempt. It was just your comic inspiration coming through.
Yeah, Keanu Reeves.
He's so beautiful in this movie. There's not enough shots of shirts being ripped off of him in this movie, but we got a couple. That was fine. I'd forgotten. It's true to form. I'd forgotten about the expendable characters in the movie. The one. I was like, oh, I was surprised that the one guy did survive, though. The one who was like sort of like their outside the Matrix switchboard operator.
Right.
Yeah, that's basically what he was. He was basically a switchboard operator, but he was also kind of like, the Geek Squad analyst type person that you see in like Criminal Minds or CSI or all those shows. There's always like that person with like around the computer screens who can look up anything and find information on anyone really fast.
That guy.
Hey, there we go. Hey. But yes, I was surprised. I was like, oh yeah, I forgot that's like supposed to be like the sign, like, oh yeah, if you're the one, give me a sign. I was like, oh, he survived. At least one of them survived, because all the other ones, when you first time you see them and they start giving you all of their little bits of character stick, like, this is my one scene to have dialogue where I get to develop a character. You're like, you're gone. I know you're going. You're not lasting. So I'd forgotten about all those people, but I'd also forgotten how effective the makeup effects are in this movie at the beginning. I was like, oh, that's really like, they really went for that, like you're being reborn into the real reality.
Yeah. And he, I think he lost like 15 pounds for that scene. Just so he looked a little more like emaciated, like he had just like had to use his muscles. He's living in a little Jello tub.
Skin looked like it was a skin suit that they attached to him. So I always assumed that was like that, not only was he a little bit thinner, but they'd put on this weird saggy skin suit thing for when he when he wakes up from the amniotic fluid in the I'm guessing this is something that it's explained in later movies, but who controls the Matrix?
Well, the robot people.
So the robot people control.
I think it's like, like we're basically run over by machines. Like our technology got away from us and they're the ones controlling everything. But I read something else yesterday that the filmmakers made the actors read all of these like really out there in-depth books on like physics and anything that would possibly help explain this. And some of them, they maybe still didn't really understand it afterwards, but they wanted the actors to really know what was going on.
Yes. I love Andres' comment there, for sure. Everybody's got that line. I love that. But that line is also from Not Like This, when she says that. I always think of Interview with the Vampire, with the scene with the sex worker with the curly hair. When he's trying to make Louis admit, like, you are a killer, blah, 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 and so when he's killing that poor woman And she's like, not like this. It's like such a serious moment. So then I hear it here, and it's like, not like, I'm like, this doesn't seem to suit the moment. But she is dying. She's dying. So it's like they stole a line from a vampire novel for that moment. So that's why it always makes me chuckle a little bit too. But I love that it lives on in that way, because I forgot how much this movie was like a hacker paranoid fantasy also. Like, oh yes, a hacker.
I knew it was real.
It's unfortunate that it has spawned the Red Pill website. I don't recommend going to that website. Just don't. We'll talk about it afterwards. We try to not. We try to not get political, I know, on our movie show. So that's a subject for off camera. But there is a website that was actually inspired by this movie, where you've taken the red pill and now you see the world for the way it really is. But it's like this really weird, like wackadoodle website.
But there's a lot of conspiracy theorists on that one.
Yes, exactly. It's all about that. So, but at least conspiracy theorists felt seen when this movie came out. I remember loving seeing this movie in the theater. Like the opening sequences, all the shots through the code and everything, and the really interesting special effects. Some of them, obviously, odd choices stylistically here and there. But I remember just being like wowed visually by this movie in the theater. And it's still granted, I was watching it on my TV at home. But it still had some of that rush. It made me remember that rush because everybody was excited for this movie. We were all kind of excited. It was like new, edgy, sexy, kinky, weird, and all the talk about the reality and what it is and what it isn't. Like that seems like straight out of it. It made me think, like, I wonder what these actors had to do to, like, when they read this script. And they were reading these lines, and then you tell me, like, oh yeah, well, they had them read all these books on these subjects. I'm like, okay, so at least it put them in a world where some of those words felt familiar, so they can make it more believable in their mouths when they're saying these lines. But it was some tough dialogue to go through, because it's like I do love that, like, what is reality? It's been constructed for it's like, oh my god, am I in the Matrix now?
Yeah, see, I watched this a couple years ago. Well, really less than 2 years ago, but it's a new year now. So
Hi, PJ.
Yes, hello PJ, and happy belated birthday. Yesterday was her birthday.
Don't look a day over 25.
That's
I hope that's a compliment that you actually are older than 25.
What was I saying? Oh yeah, I read that something else yesterday about I can't think of his name right now, but the man who coordinated all of the fight sequences, he had read the script, he liked it, but for some reason still didn't want to do it. I don't know if he thought it was just going to be like too much, or maybe he thought like, well, they're not going to let me do this how I want to do it. But he talked to the directors, and he asked them, he said, okay, well, it's going to cost this much money. And he thought, like, I might give him some exorbitant fee and they're not going to want to pay it. And they were like, oh, no, that's fine. Like, we want you, we'll pay that. And he's like, okay. And I need to have complete control over the fight sequences. Like, that's non-negotiable. They're like, okay. And so he ended up doing it. And I think the fight sequences are so amazing. This came out in '99. It was so groundbreaking at the time for its special effects. And I think most of them really hold up well.
Yeah.
20 plus years later now.
I think it's the wire work stuff that maybe doesn't hold up quite as well, because they try to do too many like spinning movements here and there. Those kind of things
isn't necessarily. That had been around in a lot of martial arts films for a while. So
yeah, it felt like sometimes those realistic ones where the human body is doing all the work and there's no, like, those kind of moments sometimes felt a little like not as good as the computerized ones, because everything else was so seamlessly done. Even if maybe some of those things maybe can be improved on in terms of the clarity of them, or any, whatever advances have been made in digital technology and filmmaking, I think that all those sequences actually still hold up really well. And I still go with the flow when the story gets into those moments. And it's only those moments where it's like, okay, here's a person doing a stunt, that I'm kind of like, oh, okay, well, there's the person doing the stunt in the middle of all this, like, CGI magicry.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was really fun watching this again. Certainly before the fourth installment comes out, I will be rewatching the second and third films because it's been a long time since I have seen those. But really excited to see what they do with it because it's been, I forget when the third one came out, but it's been a while.
It's
It's
been
been
a
a
long
while.
time.
Yeah.
Is it supposed to be like a wrap up? Are they gonna like
Who knows? I mean, the way
bring it as full
Hollywood,
circle as you can, I
yeah,
suppose?
the
Because
way they bring back sequels and remakes, who knows? There could be 12 more Matrixes after this. I
right there, you
don't know.
never know. You
Yeah,
never know if they think they could be making money. Yes, the bullet time. I remember there was so much talk about the bullet time back then. There was like special feature documentaries on the DVD. So like I remember PJ was talking about those versions of DVDs where you could like pause it and it gives you an option to like press a button so that you can like go into a little making of featurette kind of thing about this
yeah.
scene. There was so much
Well,
talk
anyway,
about that technology but like almost immediately it was like parodied in Scary Movie. Like a year or two later, Scary Movie comes out and there's a fight scene with Anna Faris where they're totally taking that like Trinity and the flying backwards and the all that. They are hilariously making fun of that, and then it was just like ripe comedy material for a while. So I can see for how that may diminish the effect of that, some of those parts. But like you said, I think the rest of it does age really well.
I
It's still
still
a really fun movie to revisit. I had a good time with it.
yeah, maybe it's just because Keanu did it first.
Yeah.
I still think it's pretty cool. But if you still haven't seen it, watch it. Really just timeless, crazy sci-fi that is
Who
the
hasn't
Matrix.
seen it?
Well, there were a couple people on our Instagram
Really?
poll who hadn't seen
Oh,
it, and I hadn't seen it till I was like 18. And at that point, that
I'm
was
so
like,
old.
already almost 20 years since it had come out. Um, so yeah, you'd be surprised. And some people, it's still like my mom hadn't seen it, and she didn't finish watching it because I think it was just. She's like, I can't handle this. I'm gonna go read. But she
Yeah,
tried.
right.
She tried. She tried watching it. But let's move on to today's official subject, which is
Oh,
it's Tuesday. It is Director Tuesday, and we are talking about Japanese director and screenwriter Yasujirô Ozu. Um, really interesting guy. Um, I didn't know a whole ton about him. I have seen the film that we picked today, which is Tokyo Story. It's just been quite a while since I've seen it. I'm looking forward to rewatching it. But just reading about his personal life, he was born December 12th, 1903, and he died December 12th, 1963. So he died on his 60th birthday, which is interesting.
oh.
He never married. There was something I read that could have suggested that he was maybe gay, but
I mean, it's very possible.
yeah,
I mean,
never
part of
married.
Japanese
Yeah,
culture
it
once
said that
upon a time was all about being with family. So he lived with his mom
he
and
did.
never married.
He lived with his mom up until she died, which was only a couple years before he died, and he was the second oldest out of I think five children. Um, yeah, and when he was 17, he was thrown out of the dormitory at his school after being accused of writing a love letter to a good-looking boy in a lower class. So who knows? He was in the military for a little bit. He was brought back into the military during World War II. He was supposed to be making like some Japanese propaganda films, but instead they sent him off to Singapore, where he was supposed to be doing a documentary there. And I don't think anything ever came of that. But he was always interested in film. He had tried doing other things and just like wouldn't get into schools. Tried like, okay, I'm going to do teacher training college. Didn't get into it. He completely failed it. But his family wasn't, the arts even now is always something that some family members are like, it's not stable. Like, I know, but I would love it. But he eventually he became an assistant director, did stuff with that. His first film was called Sword of Penitence, which has since been lost. That was written with a man named Kogo Noda, who ended up collaborating with Ozu on most of their films. They co-wrote together, and apparently they
Yeah.
used to drink quite a bit when they were writing their screenplays. I guess they would joke. They'd look at a screenplay and would remind each other, like, "Oh, how many bottles of sake to take to get through this?" Um, but had a really interesting style that was kind of all its own. No one has really figured out exactly where he got his style from.
I did read one theory, because what was when I was also looking at the style, like there's almost no camera movement in all of his films. They're
Mhm.
all stationary camera setups from a low angle.
Yeah,
Um, and someone wrote that it's almost like a visual of the camera sitting on one of the tatami mats.
yeah, it's called the tatami shot. And
And so it's
yeah,
like almost everything is filmed from that angle in these
mhm,
movies, and the camera is stationary. It does not move side to side. It does not penetrate and come back. It
yeah.
doesn't
I
do any
think
of
some
that.
of his earlier films might have done that, but certainly as his career went on, he took less and less moving shots out to the point where everything really was stationary like that. Um, he really didn't even pay attention to things like the 180 line. Apparently, I read that he was working with someone and they were trying to tell him about it, and so he filmed it both ways, and he just said there's no difference here. Like, it doesn't matter when it's two people talking to each other. Yeah, it's debatable. um, he was known for wearing this little hat. He wore that hat on a lot of film sets, known for just being a really fun guy, especially when he was drinking. Took everything very, very seriously, though, when he was on a film set. Had complete control over everything. He was really into graphic design. He did a lot of the titles. He did himself in some of his other films. Like, I really any of the even the art department, that was pretty much him. As far as like,
Mhm.
I know one of his other movies, I watched on, so on the Criterion channel right now, they have pretty much his entire film collection
Yes,
is
he is
on
that
there.
beloved a filmmaker. I believe this movie was even voted the best film ever made by Sight and Sound polls of filmmakers, as opposed to the
Yeah,
Sight and Sound critics poll. The filmmakers poll that Sight and Sound did, they have moved to putting this as like the best film ever
I
made.
think that
The
was in
film that we're talking about today,
2012.
Tokyo Story.
Yeah, I don't necessarily agree with that because everyone knows the best movie ever made is Singing in the Rain, but that's just me.
And yeah, I would be one of the people who would be more on the side of ranking this film like way, way above Singing in the Rain. Like it just does so much more, I think, from a story and character perspective. I love Singing in the Rain, but I'm sorry, there is literally like no comparison in terms of work of art cinema between this movie and Singing in the Rain. This movie is definitely outranks it in my book. It's just there's a spareness to his style that is very Zen like, which
It
people kind
is
of
like, I mean, at the other hand, I
oh,
mean,
it's
it often
totally
comes down to opinion, and it's hard to even try to compare the two. They are completely
they're
different
so
styles.
different.
They are. It really comes down. I mean, clearly, Singing in the Rain is my all-time favorite movie, and they have voted it in the top 10 before with Sight and Sound. I haven't looked at it recently, but I know it used to be like in the top 10 and it has been voted the best musical. But we're not talking about Singing in the Rain. We're talking about Ozu. Um, yeah, but this film is in black and white that we picked, Tokyo Story. This is kind of like, if you haven't seen any of his films, this is kind of like the starter film of like, see this. This is one of his most famous ones, and then you can move on. But some of his later films in color really look beautiful, and
Yeah.
he really designed everything in it, to the point of, I know one of his films, one of his later films that's in color. There's some scene where it has a street with a bunch of bars. He designed every single one of those neon lights that's hanging up there. Like, he designed them and then had the art department
That's
fabricate them.
how much he saw in his head. Like he was like, okay, he was really good at extracting an image from his mind and making it a reality, I think. Because you always get the sense that that nothing in the movie is nothing was influenced by like a producer saying, oh,
Mm-mm.
you should really add this, or you should really, like, there's none of that in these movies. There is no, like, it feels like there's nobody else controlling these pictures than him. Well, one reason I really wanted to feature him, because we were talking like, oh, who should we haven't featured any Japanese directors yet. And of course, everybody's first thought when you think Japanese director, everybody thinks Akira Kurosawa.
There's
Everybody thinks that because he is a great filmmaker.
they're totally,
Everybody knows him.
totally
Um,
different.
but this was the opening of the essay that comes with the Criterion disc if you purchase Tokyo Story. I think kind of explains why. I don't know. It just explains it a little better. So it's when Tokyo Story was released in late 1953, Western audiences were just being exposed to Japanese cinema. Akira Kurosawa had made his breakthrough with Rashomon 3 years earlier, and Kenji Mitsuguchi was moving to the forefront of the international festival scene. In 1955, Tenosuke Kinugasa's Gate of Hell won 2 Academy Awards, so the time would have been right for a very different sort of Japanese film to arrive on the global stage. Yet, Yasujirô Ozu remained unknown abroad, chiefly because decision makers considered him too Japanese to be exported. Which is just such an insulting thing to say, like, for anybody to say about these. But you can understand why. I feel like all the other movies, while they definitely very clearly made in a different culture with a different history and everything, it's so those by themselves, there's always an element of curiosity of like, oh, I don't know anything about Japan or Japanese people. This is as much exposure as a lot of people will get to the country. And the more exciting films are the ones that seemed to get attention, like the ghost stories, the samurai pictures. Rashomon also was pretty revolutionary story in and of itself, with the way it uses the different timelines and everything. But all of that kind of excitement aesthetically is like all is very stripped down in these movies. So these movies are very much about the mundane, about everybody's everyday lives being the most dramatic. Like, we talked about this, kind of reminds me of Meet Me in St. Louis in a way, where on the surface, when you look back, it's like, well, they're talking about going to a dance and having Halloween and, it's like the things they seem like the little stuff, but as like, the stereotype is, it's the little stuff that makes up life. And that was very much his perspective. I wish I could find this quote.
Yeah, this is something for people to understand this a little bit better. I'm reading this. Ozu was also an innovator in Japanese narrative structure through his use of ellipses, or the decision not to depict major events in the story. And for example, in An Autumn Afternoon in 1962, which I believe was his last film, a wedding is merely mentioned in one scene, and the next sequence references this wedding, which has already occurred. The wedding itself is never shown. This is typical of Ozu's films, which eschew melodrama, or eschew. I can't say that word. That's such a weird word. Melodrama.
I always say eschew.
Eschew.
I don't even know if that's right, but that's what I say.
Anyway, aligning moments that would often be used in Hollywood in attempts to stir an excessive emotional reaction from audiences. So his films were almost intentionally boring in a sense compared to I'm not use that word lightly.
I know what you mean.
Films where, it really was just trying to be about everyday life and really focusing on the family. So many of his films involved family drama, especially in this film. This talks about the different generations, which pretty much in any culture, maybe not quite so much American, maybe not my family, but there are a lot of people who still live in multi-generational households. And this is
even thinking about Meet Me in St. Louis, how like in that movie was unique because the grandpa lives with them, and you almost never see that in real life. And this movie actually is a remake in a way of an American film that the screenwriter saw, which we talked about, a movie called Make Way for Tomorrow, where the Depression causes a couple, they lose their home, they can't afford to live together anymore, so they have to live with their children, but their children none of them can house both of them at the same time. So the parents are pretty much split up permanently and just sort of bounced around between their kids' houses. And there's a lot of like, they're too busy really to focus and give love and attention to their parents. And it ends very sadly with them being really separated permanently because there's no way for them to live together in the future with the family and the depression being the way it is around them. And this was like a brilliant way to take that story, because it's perfectly tailor-made to adapt to like an Asian family dynamic. Because then you're seeing the changes in post-war society of the child and the parent growing apart. Like, did those bombs blow up the traditional family structures of Japan? This is what a family looks like now, with people who remember what family was like before. And it really is like a deep dive into family as drama, as a source of drama in and of itself. We're just living in, like, everybody's family talks. You talk about your family, about how dramatic your life is. All these little tiny things feel so big in the moment, and then later on you look back, oh, that wasn't such a big deal. But when you're living it, it feels like the most dramatic thing that's happening to you. And these movies are really, that's what these movies are. I found this, just like the story of it, because I've seen Make Way for Tomorrow, and it's like just one of the most heartbreaking stories ever. It's a mercenary tearjerker. And this one, for some people, is too. Some people I encourage you to go with the flow. It is not meant to have big fireworks dramatically. You're supposed to go on the ride with them, basically. And I find this story heartbreaking too, but I'll let everyone come to their own conclusions seeing it.
So this did come out in 1953. Basic plot is an old couple visit their children and grandchildren in the city, but receive little attention.
It's such a minor description. That's really what the movie is about. It really is just about that. And you see like how each different and they also structure the film in a way so that you're going in the ascendance of like the hierarchy of the family. So like you're starting with the oldest and going down one by one, or something, because they actually, in the story, in order to keep with that framework, they eliminate one of the things, like you mentioned, the ellipses. One of those ellipses is a visit to their youngest child on their way to Tokyo, and that is not ever shown. They just talk about it, so that visually and in terms of the script, the structure can mirror the hierarchy of the family. And of course, the older the kids are, the longer they've lived in the family, the less devotion, or what's the word I'm looking for? They sort of don't have the same, not passion, they don't have the same drive to be as devoted to their parents as the younger kids do. It seems like the longer you've lived, you've built up this sort of like you've banked enough points to be like, okay, I put in a lot of time, I don't have to put in all my time now. And then as you get younger and younger, you see like the younger and younger the kids go, it's like a little bit more devoted than the previous kid in a little way, that the further down you go, because they haven't had as much time and they don't feel like maybe they have had as much of a burden. Like my older sister, she did a lot of caring for us when she was growing up. Like she really put in a lot of hours in her life. And now that she's older, she's very much got her own life. And she's not quite as like, oh, whatever mother needs, I'll make sure to get it done. She's like, no, I got my own kids. I got my own business. I've got all these things to take care of. I literally don't have the same amount of time to give you. It doesn't mean that I don't love you. And those are really, like, to me, those are like, that's life. That is like the source of happiness in life, is having a family of people around you, whether it's a chosen family or your blood family. And, so those are really like core emotional things for me. So that's why stories like this they really tug at the heartstrings, like hardcore, in when I'm watching. So I know I'm going to be like sobbing tonight watching this movie. I absolutely know it.
Fun. Well, yeah.
Yes, Rocky, relationship equity. That's a term that is exactly it. It's like, the older kids feel that they built up a lot of equity, so they have more license to be less doting. And the younger kids, it's like, no, you've only put in 20 years, I put in 45. You are going to be the one to take mom to all the restaurants. You're going to take her shopping. I will give you my credit card and I'll pay for it. Actually, that never happens, but nobody ever gives me a credit card to go shopping for mom.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how, because since having seen this, whenever I saw this, probably, could have been even 10 years now, like my grandparents lived with us for a while, so being really close to them, especially my grandma, maybe this will have a different effect on me than it did before. But we shall see. So this movie is available on the Criterion channel, the Criterion app. We frequently plug it. We haven't had a Criterion movie. Well, we had Black Christmas was on there last month. But we're usually always plugging that app. If you are a film lover, it's really a must-have. Oh, Crystal says you could also watch on HBO Max.
Yes, when I searched it earlier today, it showed up as available on HBO Max. I do encourage going to the Criterion app to watch it because Criterion has really been the #1 preserver of this amazing master filmmaker's like entire career. Like this is like the filmmaker so many filmmakers in the world wish they were. Like all the greatest filmmakers of the world know this name, treasure this name, worship this name. And Criterion has really done such an amazing job bringing so many of its films onto its platform so that they can be preserved for a long time. And the Criterion app, basically, since this movie is considered one of, like, counting on one hand the greatest works of art in cinema ever created, or works of art in any medium, really, they have, I think, are going to keep the full collection of that DVD with all of its special features, its commentary tracks, everything. There's so much material. So if you are inspired from watching this movie, this is like, you know, everybody agrees this is the entryway movie for Yasujirô Ozu. And if you like this movie, Criterion has almost all of his other movies on there.
HBO Max.
Tons of extra material to learn about him.
HBO Max does also have late spring and late autumn, but that is just a drop in the ocean compared to all the stuff of his that they have on the Criterion app.
I think there's like 30 films on there.
If you know, you just want to try HBO Max if you already have it. If you are interested in watching more of his films or watching, like I was watching earlier today, there are a couple little featurettes that actually are supposed to go with Tokyo Story, but I watched something called In Search of Ozu that was pretty interesting, and you learn a lot about him as a person from some people who actually worked with him, and like his nephew. Yeah, so we're always just plugging the Criterion collection. They might still have a couple week free trial if you haven't had it. Otherwise, the cheaper way to do it is to just pay for it for a year, which seems like a lot at first. That's what I ended up doing. It was like $90 something, but it is ultimately cheaper if you do it that way. Best pitch. We're trying.
Well, you should write them and tell them that you joined because of the book club for movies.
Like, what? Yeah, we're trying. We either want Criterion or like Turner Classic Movies to sponsor us. So.
We'll take them all.
Yeah, or all of them. We'll do a Criterion day every week. We'll do a Turner Classic Movies day every day or every week.
See, it can be done.
It can be done. We're an equal opportunist for sponsors. Speaking of sponsors, if you are interested in supporting us financially, please check out our Patreon. I am putting the link over here. The tiers start at only $2 a month. You could cancel at any time. You could upgrade at any time. If you do the screenwriter tier or higher, you could actually pick a movie for upcoming calendars. So far, we have 3. We're going to have 3 picks for February. So those spots are getting slim. We're getting slim, people, which is good. We appreciate that. But check that out if that's something you're interested in, if you are enjoying our show. Yes. Tomorrow is Woman Crush Wednesday, and we will be talking about the fabulous Angela Bassett. Films. We did see her in What's Love Got to Do with It back in November when we talked about Lawrence Fishburne. So we're revisiting both of them this week with a Lawrence Fishburne film yesterday and an Angela Bassett film tomorrow. They do work well together, although we're watching them in separate films this time. But that is tomorrow at 3:30. Please watch Tokyo Story and join us tomorrow, and we'll discuss our thoughts after watching the film. And then moving on to Angela Bassett, yes, and her incredible arms. We will certainly,
Oh, yes.
I'm sure we will talk about her incredible arms once again, because damn, woman. I'm doing like push-ups on my knees, you know, who knows? Like she probably just like curl. Oh, she saw her in New Orleans. Ugh.
So jealous. I wish I could have seen her in New Orleans. Ooh, well, tune in tomorrow.
Yeah, that's our pick. That is our pick for tomorrow. We are doing Strange Days, so you are in luck, Andres. We didn't even know that, but we secretly did that for you.
Just
Totally planned. Totally planned. Thank you guys again for watching today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Until then.